Something a little different today. Ibby is out on his honeymoon, um, and so for the next couple podcasts, you're going to be stuck with just me. Well, not just me. We will have guests, and so I'll shut up as much as I can and just let them share their wisdom. So we'll keep this intro short. We've got Dean Ginsberg on today. Fascinating guy who's done some really, really amazing things in the lifecycle marketing and email marketing side of things. And he runs a business called Winback, and highly recommend everyone go and check out his new site. And everyone shoot him a message, follow him on LinkedIn. He is a wealth of knowledge about how to get stronger ROI out of your email program and out of your contact list. Where most brands are leaving a good chunk of money on the table. So without further ado, here's Dean Ginsberg.
I'm Ibby Syed.
I'm Sean Collins.
And this is Numbers and Narratives.
All right, Dean, welcome and thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked. For everyone who doesn't already know who you are, you mind giving a quick rundown on who you are and your background and what you're up to?
Yeah, my name is Dean Ginsberg. I'm the founder of Winback. I've been working in growth or retention for the last 10 years, focused on, there's a period where I was doing like digital transformations for enterprise brands. Then I built a product-led service to reactivate dormant email subscribers. And now I'm really into automations and testing and bring in an agency that is a combination of a director of retention and the execution arm to run advanced testing programs for larger brands.
That's awesome. And we've gotten a chance to hang out a little bit recently, but prior to kind of the last couple of weeks, the last I'd seen was when you were launching Winback originally, and it's been like a pretty large transformation from Winback when you launched it to what you're up to now. Can you kind of like walk us through what that journey looked like?
I want to go back even further. So I used to run an agency called Stacked Collective. And what Stacked did was we did these owned media transformations for publicly traded or private equity held companies. And every time that I was in there, part of my scope was both building the MarTech infrastructure, but it was building the teams and being the liaison between the board and the CEO and how are we going to drive an increase in LTV. We're working with like more complex marketing tools and more complex team structures than you get in like a e-commerce ecosystem. And pretty consistently, every time a CEO would come to me and he or she would say, we're not going to make our numbers this quarter. Can we just email everybody on the email list? And then I would go to the lifecycle person and be like, this is what the CEO says. And those two sides just didn't really know how to have that conversation of what are the risks involved with that and what is the reward potentially from doing that. Where lifecycle teams were constantly under resources, constantly just trying to like duct tape the next campaign to hit their targets and maintain business as usual. And the CEO is like, all I know is we send an email, we make money, and I need to make some money. And I just was like, to be honest, nobody's doing anything interesting in this space. And it's 80+% of all emails. So if we agree that there's value in our first party data or zero party data, the fact that we don't leverage 80% of it seems like a problem worth solving and nobody's working on that. So maybe I'll just like focus on that for 6 months and see what I come up with. And that was the like origin of Winback. And in building that, I was basically like, it's not very exciting to go to a company and say, pay me X amount of dollars and I'll do something with this asset that you think has no value. So instead we were like, let's do it off of performance pricing. And you just pay me a percentage of the incremental revenue that we produce. And we grew like really fast. We worked with like Jones Road Beauty, worked with Ridge Wallace, True Classic. We even worked with Coinbase. I was kind of experimenting, like, does this not just work in D2C? Does this work in, fintech or healthcare? Like, every company has a ton of dormant email subscribers, and nobody's had an interesting
Yeah.
plan on how to do anything with that. And so now what we do is we focus on, we still have that product to reactivate dormant email subscribers, but in doing that, a lot of the friction that we eventually ran into as a performance-based model was, oh wait, we're realizing that our team's not doing enough before they go dormant. So we're just paying you all this money. And to be honest, there's so much we could do on the front end. And I was like, well, you know, the reason why, if we can do it on the back end, we could definitely do it on the front end. Right. And there's so much low hanging fruit across the whole program. And to be honest, like, this is a really cool niche and targeted area, but like, it's just one tool that we have in our tool shed. And really what we built was this advanced testing culture, this engine that allows us to test and learn much faster than internal brands can do, and honestly than other agencies can do. And the fact that we were just focusing that on the dormant audience seemed like a missed opportunity, and it was something that a lot of our clients were asking for. So we evolved to basically just expand. So now we're focusing on all automations and helping CMOs own LTV at at the directorate level, and pairing that with the executional resources to run high ROI tests.
What you did originally, we went back, right? Goes in the face of like what every blog tells you to do, right? Like everyone's like, if they're not opening, if they're unengaged, like we'll even arrest, find your 20% of high engaged people and just like beat them to death and send them the messages. And so you say like, okay, well, that's just ridiculous. You paid money to acquire these people already. This isn't like a lost, it's like a distressed asset. It's like you went out and found this distressed asset and figured out how to get value out of it. And that's massive. So like, were there consistent things that worked across brands? Like, I know it was so much was a test and learn, but are there consistent types of messages or positioning or offers that routinely win, or was it really brand by brand specific?
I'm gonna give like a longer answer to this question.
Please do. Yeah.
So that was my biggest concern when we started. I was like, am I selling a thing where I'm just going to come in and hurt the brand's reputation? Right? Like, do you hire me and then all of a sudden I make you some money and then your email program is like in the dirt? Like, that was, it was like a do no harm, like, first approach. Um, and every time that we ran into deliverability issues in working with the brand, it was actually the opposite. So, one, if you think about what is a general strategy for brands around dormant email subscribers, it's do not email them until Black Friday and then email them 20 times all at once. And if you ask any lifecycle marketer, even the best ones, it's like, that's what we do. And mostly the reason why they do that is because that's what's always been done before. And the targets have been set on the business level, and they need to hit those targets. But in terms of like the actual impact to deliverability, they both don't have the tools to measure what that impact is. And there's not a deeper level understanding of even what deliverability is and what factors impact it. That's changed a little bit in the last 2 years because of the changes around Gmail and Yahoo have made it so that people who don't get this, even at a baseline level, are ending in spam. And the only way you learn about this is when you're
in the doghouse.
It's like, oh, now all of a sudden this is really important for everybody in the entire company, right? And so I'll preface this. The baseline and sort of the outline of like only email your top 20%, et cetera. It's true only in certain times of the year. And then it becomes extremely untrue. So nobody is doing that strategy of only like be super conservative, right? The reality is there's a wide range of how much risk people are taking with this audience. Some people are every single campaign emailing people who haven't engaged in over ever, right? We found brands of just like, oh, we just email everybody all the time. Can you help us reactivate our dormant list? I'm like, no, I
They're
can't.
dead. They're gone. They hate you.
They hate you. They still hate you. They've hated you for years, right? Um, the reality, though, was similar. I like the phrase that you used, like a distressed asset. It was like, we treat this like a distressed asset. And so um, we're specialists in how to maximize revenue and minimize risk in each send. So, one, some of the biggest thing that worked was, instead of qualifying somebody as dormant using a single segment definition of has not engaged, opened email, clicked an email, visited the website, made a purchase in over 90 days, 180 days, 270 days, 365 days, whatever that definition is for the brand. Instead of that definition, we use every single uh, piece of engagement, every piece of data that we had about that user before they went dormant, to determine both what was the risk of emailing them and what was the return. And big surprise, there's a ton of risk in people who have engaged in the last 90 days, particularly in a world where far more brands are having bot attacks and far more brands are using tools like retention.com, and where users are not subscribed or even bought from third-party data sources. And so one, it was like building out to be honest, we started with a machine learning approach where we built this like really complex algorithm. And then we constantly tried to beat that against our team, manually setting segments and adjusting segments. And we could never beat the manual segmentation. So we ended up even dropping the algorithmic uh, approach to this because to be honest, any algorithmic result did not take into account the fact that those people often had not been emailed or not even emailed in a new way in ever, right? Um, so the algorithm would basically say like, okay, these people engaged in a positive way, they took these positive actions, then they stopped engaging for a period of time. It's weighing all of that and adjusting those weights, um, and it would come up with its best guess, right? Then um, we would then send a one of our emails that we nailed down using this other AI agent that was hyper personalized, and we'd get that person to engage. And it was like, oh, like for this person, it wasn't so much about the fact that we were emailing them too much. It was that the emails we were sending them didn't speak to them, right? It didn't reignite that spark. And so the algorithm is going to constantly optimize off of what you had, the data it was previously given, as opposed to our team that was able to build these sub segments and test and kind of move things around. There's and people doing really interesting things in that space that have gotten it. Like there may be a future where that is not the case. We just could never beat it ourselves. So one, it was in the targeting side. The other side was on the messaging. Um, and I can go into that even more, but I feel like it's worth a pause at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I'm glad you brought up retention.com because that was something that was bumping around my head the whole time you were talking there. Is there has to be some different level of profile, interest, you know, risk, all of that based off of acquisition source, right? Like, if you're using retention.com, okay, they visited your site. So at least there's some level of awareness. If you're buying lists, you know, who knows? Maybe they have some level of awareness. Maybe they absolutely have no idea. If someone signed up for your list intentionally and then becomes unengaged, there's a different level of intent and interest. Was that kind of the first? When you talk about building segments manually, to me it sounds like you're going to start to And it's always a decision tree for me, or a flow chart where I'm like, okay, first let's figure out, like, have they purchased? Have they not purchased? That's a big gap. Then it's like, are they, you know, if they've never purchased, did they get to a point where they were browsing products? But like, maybe there's a middle layer there of like, what's the acquisition source? Is that kind of the way you approached these manual segmentations? Is like one cut at a time and then figure out what's the difference, what's the opportunity size, what's the risk?
I think one of the benefits of actually building this algorithmically or like using an algorithm was it really forced us to understand like what are the problems to be solved um, in a way that you don't get to when you just are building it manually. And there's 2 steps. And honestly, every brand can do step 1. There are toxic emails. And to be honest, most of the deliverability issues are related to toxic emails that are not just in the list, but are repeatedly emailed in the list. And some of the things to me seem like obvious, but the amount of brands that I saw that aren't doing this and are getting hurt by it is pretty massive.
When you talk about like toxic emails, you're talking about like hard bounces, honeypots, those kind of things? Or are you talking about like just there's a trait of a person who somehow is a negative signal?
Yes, like hard bounces, consistent spam reporters, um, people who have never engaged in email, um, people who are obvious bots. And you don't need machine learning to tell you that somebody's an obvious bot. It's pretty, you could see it in the profile, like with your eyes, right? And um, the just removing those, like building segments that just remove those, is half the battle, right? The harder ones are the ones in the middle. They're the ones that like, hey, this person was super high LTV. They used to engage all the time. And then they just stopped engaging, but they stopped engaging like 2 years ago. What does that mean? It's like, well, it could be a turned over email, in which case then it's a potential like high risk for a spam trap, right? Um, you could imagine another element. It's like, oh, well, so you mentioned source, right? Source could be retention.com. Yeah, person could be highly engaged, but they're from a bot list, right? And maybe their actions are a bit out of character of what you'd be looking for in somebody who is subscribed, right? So when you kind of break it down, there's a bunch of nuance in the middle of the list itself. The way that we've actually approached that nuance is um, being risk on or risk off for an account based off of um, that where that person is landing by ISP in a given week. So this is where it starts to get like a little technical, but it's like we're assigning risk scores based off of these qualities, and we're still using our algorithm to assign those risk scores, right? The but we're also using like we use a bot tool. It's called Glock Apps. Many people use it. A lot of people who have it don't even look at it, but we look at it like all the time, right? And it's doing these seed list tests and it's saying, based off of your postmaster, like all of these deliverability monitoring tools, we're recognizing that you need to be risk on for um, Gmail this week. Now all of a sudden we're pulling back pretty significantly. We're going hyper conservative for this audience in this week. And then we're also communicating that to the brand on the front end. We're saying, hey, like this is your recommended segment for the week for targeting. And what ends up happening is like every brand, I can't say every brand that works with us, like their deliverability improves, right? Because nobody wants to pay for deliverability agency. But people do want to pay for a performance agency that you only pay for incremental lift, who also happens to give you deliverability services across your entire account. Um, and that was the big insight was that like being really good at deliverability, like to focus on this audience, you have to be very good at deliverability, and being very good at deliverability is a superpower in this day and age within email. And to be very good at deliverability, it's actually easier to be in an agency where you're working across many different brands and focusing just on the hardest audience. Um, so yeah, those are some of the big shifts.
That's wild. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of another situation where like the technical side is almost like a happy second order effect, where it's like, hey, we aren't actively saying we're going to fix your deliverability, but in order to effectively reach these people, your overall sender scores and deliverability will improve. Uh, it's almost like an SC, like a good content marketing agency, right? Like, hey, maybe we're not focused on net new traffic. We're writing content for your users or for your leads in middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. But as a second order effect, you're going to start ranking for these other keywords that we're writing about, and other people are going to start sharing this. You'll see other effects, even though our primary purpose is helping you actually close sales or something like that.
Yeah, I would say like part of the honest like part of the reason of expanding services though was the there's two parts of win back that suck, right? One is in terms of a magnet, the people who are interested in making money from their dormant lists are often the people who have been trying to make money from their dormant lists already without any of the understanding or toolings of the right way to do it. And so the amount of vetting that we'd have to do before we even started working with a brand of like, hey, is this like, do you actually need a deliverability agency because you are consistently landing in spam because of poor practices? And by the way, is that deliverability agency going to be effective? Like, sorry, I'll end it this way. It's like deliverability agencies are only effective if culturally there is a shift internally. Like there's no miracle version of sending everybody an email all the time that like with the right deliverability agency, like you get through. So there was a lot of inbound from accounts and really great and like large companies where you look in and you're just like, hey, there's no version of your current practices where this works for you. And then there's another one, which is like they were actually executing good practices, often because they stepped in, into a honeypot, right? And then had to revert back culturally. CEO brings us in, we start showing significant wins. And then all of a sudden it's like Memorial Day. And it's like, well, they're making money from the dormant. Like there's clearly value in the dormant list. Like just start emailing them all the time. And then we're like, whoa, this is like, but it negates all of the work that we're doing to try to identify the right people to target. And so I do still think that like, while we're a good tool for part of the reason why we exist is because there's this lack of knowledge and understanding between the C-suite and the lifecycle marketer. Um, Oftentimes we're built to kind of help that. It could be misinterpreted where we're actually making it harder for the lifecycle manager to now make the argument. And now all of a sudden we're pitted against them. Uh, and the short term emailing everybody looks great, right? In the medium term and very quickly you realize that's not the case. And so we found like, hey, we should actually just kind of run the whole program is our ideal version of this.
That's sounds like a great little pivot. So, in my experience of working with email agencies, of freelancing and or contracting for an email agency, of getting pitched by email agencies, generally the way that they scope it and approach it is like, we will send 4 campaigns a month or what, it's like I get that that's the logical deliverable, like that's what I'm getting, but it always feels off to me, um, because there's no thought to like the segmentation strategy. There's no, it's just like, if you're sending 4 emails a month, that's basically one a week. So you're saying what, you're going to email my entire list once a week, and that's what I'm paying you for? Like that unequivocally does not fit my retention strategy, my life cycle strategy, anything like that, right? So like, how do you kind of think about scoping, pricing, your engagements now?
I would say like this is a big gap in the space, and I am trying to fill it, but I'm struggling with this because um, particularly in the Shopify Klaviyo ecosystem, there are over 1,000 email agencies, probably. I mean, maybe at least, maybe that's an exaggeration, but there seems to be a lot, right? Um, and most internal teams' understanding of an email program is like you set up some automations and you have to send like 3 to 5 to 7 campaigns a week. And to produce a campaign is a lot. Like you have to coordinate across multiple teams to get the content. You have to actually create the email. It has to get approved. You have to ship it. Like that's a lot of work. And oftentimes people view lifecycle as like a cost and not as a flexible budget like you do on acquisition, where you're looking at the ROI and saying, if I give you $1, you give me two, like how do we get more dollars to give you? Right.
Yep.
Often it's like, hey, this other agency will do it for this amount. And you're saying you'll do it for that amount. And it's just like, well, sure. Yeah. That's how decisions are often being made. And the way that I view it, and I like in relationship to that, the ecosystem responds. And so a good agency is an agency that can coordinate well, can communicate well, can produce creative that gets approved easily, and can pump out 3 to 4 emails a week, right? They'll sell the concept of strategy and automations and all of that, but the marketplace is kind of funneling them into being really good at this specific set of skills. Similarly, a lifecycle manager often is not capable of fully producing a campaign from start to finish. And so the agency having a copywriter, a designer, somebody to set up the email, somebody to QA the email while they're doing the internal meetings and running the program, right, is often a helpful relationship. The reality, though, is in both of those scenarios, a ton of money is being left on the table related to automations. And there's very often we're not relating the revenue produced from the program to higher order metrics like LTV that actually impact the growth equation. And that's why it's considered a cost center. It's like, you know, all we know is that if we send out these emails, then we get 30% of our revenue is like associated to this channel, right? And so whoever can get us that amount of emails for the cheapest amount of money, like is great. And hey, you missed the target. Okay, we'll just fire that person. We'll bring in another person or put more pressure or send more emails, right? This is the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, it's not do better work. It's just do more work.
Do more work, 100%, right? And do more work for less money, right? Oh, tariffs came in, do more work for less money, right? Like fewer resources. And I'm like, I'd much prefer to look at how product orgs at Facebook or, like the concept of um, iteration and behavioral science is deeply understood. Its impact is deeply understood in product teams. And all that means is like a user hits friction at some point in their life cycle. How do you help leverage owned channels to allow them to break through and make a purchase? That's very different philosophically, strategically, than send more campaigns. It requires a completely different skill set, a completely different team. And ultimately, in my opinion, it leads to significantly more revenue. The other piece of it is you can A/B test within these automations. So with the campaign, it's like, well, you're not going to create 4 different versions of the campaign. You're just struggling to get the one out, right? And then you also have the variable of like time and who it's being sent to, right? So even the concept of like, oh, we want to send this campaign to like this segment. It's like, why? Because you think that segment will respond better to that campaign. Like, I guarantee you, if I send that campaign to more people, it'll show more revenue. right?
Right. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like statistically, I can guarantee you someone is more likely to purchase if I send them a message saying you should purchase than if you don't, right? Like but that is looking at one purchase right now. Like, yes, you will see a revenue lift if you send an email. You will see, if you send it to a bigger audience, you will see more revenue lift. But that doesn't make it the right long-term decision. It make it the right strategic decision.
Well, I mean, I would add that like let's most ESPs have a default setting for attribution, right? And particularly in like a GA4 world, people are relying more and more on their ESPs to understand what is the impact of their email program, right? Say just Klaviyo for an example. The default setting in Klaviyo is 5-day open attribution. And the default setting is not to remove Apple MPP opens. The fact that anybody you email with Apple shows an automatic open. So that's 30% of emails. So this is an active audience. A percentage of them are going to buy from other channels, from natural, from the thought in the shower. If you send that person an email once a week, you are more likely to, whether they have opened it or not, or that influenced their decision, a percentage of those purchases are going to be attributed to email. The more people you email, the more purchases are going to come from email. Yes, because some of them are going to be influenced that wouldn't have been otherwise, and you're sort of like fish in a barrel, like fish trying to like fish with dynamite, right? Um, but a large percentage of them never even saw the email. It's just going to be attributed, and you're them holding your email team and your marketing team accountable to that channel. So that's why I'm always like, unless it's impacting the actual lifetime value of that user, right? It's not helping the company at all, right? And you can see very perverse incentives that lead to very suboptimal strategies based off of attribution sources from biased actors in the space, such as the email platform that wants to show you that it's making you more money, right? So this is like, it's just, I really believe that that's the source of the fact that people are leaving a ton of money on the table. And then that's being counteracted with like everybody focusing on reducing their CAC and giving Facebook more money, right? And the only if that 30% is a fixed number because the only solution is to send more emails and there's a cap on how many emails you can send, then the only way to truly grow is to try to reduce your CAC, right? On paid media channels. And I'm here just like, I think that there is significantly more opportunity on the owned media channels, and around conversion rate optimization, um, that significantly shifts the growth equations and like the valuations of these companies.
What especially hits is like in times like these, right? We've seen these kind of drawbacks in or pullbacks in spend from brands a few times, right? Like 2020 when COVID was first hitting, like and no one knew what was going to happen, so big pullbacks. Uncertainty around tariffs, pullbacks, right? Like it just happens, and every single time, your safety net is your email platform, right? And it's like if you trust it to save you through these tough times, why aren't you investing in it in the same way that you invest in Facebook ads? And you give how much in creative, how much in ad spend, how much in custom landing pages for these, how much in influencers and stuff like that on the ad side of the house. And then you underinvest in email for years and then come to it asking it to save your business in tough times.
I actually have a lot of empathy for that thinking because lifecycle teams are always asking for more resources. And if I give you an associate or I give you a coordinator, are you able to show me that you make more money? Right? What is the ROI on that additional person? And because oftentimes, and that's how the CEO is viewing it, like how could they not view it that way? Right. Um, and the reason why there's no significant impact on that additional head or additional resource within lifecycle is because it's all around just producing more campaigns, right? Even if they're like, oh, I need somebody to handle campaigns so that I can focus on testing and automations, the truth is most lifecycle managers then get pulled back into the campaigns because that's the thing that has to get out next. The other piece is um, most lifecycle managers have never run a truly advanced testing program. And I say that of like, if you've seen what a like an agile product team looks like. I mean, I'm sure in built you kind of had examples of this, like what it means to truly test and iterate on a product and understand like how users go through an onboarding flow and the amount of times like there that is more equivalent to like what a lifecycle program should be than like having a subject line test here and there, right? Which is what most people call testing.
That one always kills me. Like just it like hurts my soul. Where I get I have no problem. Like you should test different subject lines. Like try and figure out what you can do to make the most opens right now.
Yeah.
But if you aren't walking away from things with new hypotheses and new lessons learned to bring forward, I would say you're not testing. You're trying, or you're, maybe I need to come up with a more catchy, pithy way of saying that. But like, testing should involve learning and iteration and growth. So like, okay, so if it's let's say that most ecom or most lifecycle managers in general don't really understand how to thoroughly test. Can you give us like what's the 5-minute rundown of like what does it actually mean to do thorough testing?
Here's instead of I'll sort of structure it of like what do I see when I go into accounts, and it's almost like this triage approach, right? We call it like we do like a format that a lot of people do, the effort impact assessment. So what is a low effort project that has high impact? The highest impact, lowest effort projects, or the highest impact, medium effort projects are a flow does not exist that should exist. You'd be surprised by how many times somebody has like an abandoned checkout, but they don't have the abandoned cart, right? Similarly, a core segment of that user base is not separated from the average from the baseline user. A very easy example of this is like first time purchasers or prospects versus return customers. Let's say, for example, in like an abandonment flow, even if you have the same content for each, just the ability to see how those users are interacting differently is really important because that establishes a new baseline, right? Um, the in general, the amount of times that I've gone in and I've seen tests that were set up like 6 months ago that have a clear winner that are still in test mode is pretty significant, right? Similarly, the amount of tests that are running that don't have a clear winner that are still running is also significant, right? So these are the like this is sort of where I'm coming from of like it's whether the skill whether the capability is there or not, the there's generally an overwhelm when looking at the flows, and there's no systematic way to even keep track of when you created a test, why you created the test, what your expected outcome is from the test, and what you learned from that test and what you're going to do next from that test, right? That's the 101 of testing. And if you haven't structured a test in that way from the beginning, that's what happens when I go in and I look at and do an audit. It's like, what's going on here? The other like major issue that I see across accounts, and this is very related to like you installed some platform, and that platform has a bunch of flows that they set up as part of their onboarding, and now those flows are just triggering these like messages that nobody has really thought about, and those messages are sent at these really pivotal moments in a customer life cycle, and oftentimes overlap with other messages that you're sending in other flows. um, that is like I get so upset about that, right? And one of the biggest like recommendations I could have, it takes a ton of time. It is super tedious and is very worth it, is take all of your flows in Klaviyo and um, create a Figma file that has all of them in one place that you can see when each is triggered, what the email looks like. And then so you can even communicate that to the C-suite and they can go in and be like, oh, well, why is there overlap in this area? Um, what we do is we operate off of sprint cycle. I find sprints are really helpful because it just creates a bookmark of like, are we meeting? We have a ritual where we're meeting and to say like, this is how we're prioritizing the test this sprint. This is our expected return from these tests. This is what we expect to happen with that test. Here's why we're selecting it. And we have debates internally so that the best test kind of rise to the front. After each test is complete, it becomes memorialized. And what the benefit of being in an agency is we're running tests across every single account and we organize all of that. And there's really cool like AI stuff that can be built on top of all of that organized data. Um, and then the like ability to kind of even reach back into your previous logs or learn from other teams of like, hey, this test is really working here. Maybe it'll work over there. Um, yeah, that was a bit. I've covered like so many bases in that, but I feel like very strongly about all of those things.
No, that all of that made sense. And I think it's not the answer I was expecting, but it was a phenomenal answer. If that uh, I do have a question. You mentioned abandoned checkout versus abandoned cart. Do you typically run both of those at the same time, or would you say like, you know, have both flows have like a 50-50 split and one treatment group doesn't get a message for abandoned checkout but does get abandoned cart, and then vice versa for the other group? Or kind of how do you think about those two flows playing together?
Yeah, and this is like so we also work with a lot of apps and a lot of like we work outside of e-commerce as well, but this is particularly in like the Shopify ecosystem. There's um just not by it's not set up by default that the abandoned cart event fires and triggers a flow. So a percentage of people will add to cart that do not make it to checkout. And if you're not emailing those people an abandoned cart email, like that is a lot of money that is like left on the table.
You can swear
Similarly,
it's okay.
similarly, if you're sending them an abandoned cart email, but you could be sending them an abandoned checkout email, that's just a better email.
Yeah. So
Um,
it's more like you would have both live, but you would have like a flow filter on the abandoned cart that says if they make
exactly.
it to checkout, don't send.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like they're
Gotcha.
graduating from abandoned browse to abandoned cart to abandoned checkout.
Love
Um,
that.
the
Okay.
the other piece to this actually that is more relevant. It's not even that abandoned checkout is a better email. It is that users will put their email into the checkout. So there's a percentage of users who didn't sign up in the pop-up that are going to add something to cart, right? You can't email them unless you're using something like a retention.com to email them without subscribing. Um, but if they've never subscribed, you're not using like a third-party data pool to like buy their email. Um, if they add to cart, you can't email them. Um, you could retarget them on Facebook, but you can't email them. The If they make it to checkout, they put their email in and then they abandon, you can now send them the abandoned checkout email, right? And if you don't have your abandoned checkout flow running, the abandoned cart email event will trigger, but it will not be associated with the email, right? And so it'll actually not send. That's like it's a little bit in the weeds, but it's super important. So I guess
Yeah, that's super important. Um, well, damn, Dean, this was a fascinating conversation. Uh, before we sign off, if people want to work with you, if they want to hear from you, if they want to learn more about what you've got going on, where's the best place for people to find you?
we just launched our new website. It's winback .pro. Um, and then you can always find me on LinkedIn. It's Dean Ginsberg. Um, and yeah, would love feedback on my new website if you check it out.
All right, everyone, you've got homework. Go to winback.pro and then send Dean a cold message on LinkedIn, tearing his site apart. and we'll go from there. Dean, it was an absolute pleasure hanging out with you today, man. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much.